Hi everyone, my name is Charles and welcome to part 12 of the OpenSCAD video series. In this part we'll be talking about color. So something important to note about color in OpenSCAD is that it's only relevant for previewing and it doesn't really have an effect on the actual render of an object. So if you're to actually render an object so you can generate different types of files from it, the color has no effect unless you're getting pictures from it in animation, which I will close. So, say we have, let's change it up. Let's say we have a sphere. The diameter is 10, and the FN value is 50. So, how would we color this? So we use a function called color. Now, this can either have 3 or 4 values, and they don't have anything to do with the X, Y, or Z axes. So, if we say 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, we get this sort of gray color. So it's important to talk about what these values actually are. I mean, it's not super helpful to do it before anything, but otherwise it's not super clear. So, generally in computer graphics and pixels and whatnot, the values of color, you have, the first one is red. So this is how red your color is. This is green. So how green your color is, and this is how blue your color is. So it goes R, G, B, and then alpha, which is optional. And what alpha is how transparent your object is. So generally in computing, you have numbers that go from 0 to 255. 255 is the largest 8-bit integer. But in OpenSCAD, it only goes from 0 to 1. So the scope of the variables, instead of being 0 to 255, you use decimal values, and they're from 0 to 1. So you might ask, how do you get a certain color that you want? So what you can do is you go to the internet and Google RGB color codes chart and say you want to color any of these colors. You can just hover over them in this application. Each color, most colors have some sort of, they have values associated with them in terms of their red, green, and blue values. So let's say we want a pink, a nice pink. We can see that the red value is 204, the green value is 0, and the blue value is 102. Okay, I was able to get off that. So essentially, we go put these in. $204, 0, and what was the last one? 102. 102. And we can try that. And it does give us pink, but it's not quite what we're looking for. And as you see, we get warnings that the value of 204 is too large. So what we want to do is we want to divide by 255 because these numbers are meant for 255 possibilities. You're supposed to have numbers up until 255, and so we want the fraction associated with that. So we just divide each of our numbers by 255. 0 divided by 255 is still 0, so it doesn't make a difference. We divide by 255. And there we go. We have our pink sphere. And just as an example for alpha, we can say 0.5. And we can see that our sphere is now transparent in an interesting way. And it kind of changes color. I'm not sure why it does that, but as we get closer to 1, it becomes less transparent and becomes more opaque. So at 1, it's completely opaque, and at 0, it's completely transparent and it's disappeared, which is not helpful to us at all. So usually a value maybe somewhere in 0.2, in between 0 and 1. Yeah, probably not 0 because 0 is not super helpful. So we'll get rid of the alpha value for now. It's not, we don't need it for what we're doing. So say we want to change colors. There's a few ways to do this. We could do this with time, with an animation, or we could do this by translating it in the shape. So let's translate the sphere. We'll say 100 in the x direction. And now let's rotate it. But before we do that, we're going to introduce a for loop. Let's say there's 100, and we've been through how to rotate things around in a circle before, so that they're evenly spaced out. You have to multiply by 360 and divide by how many objects you have. You know, this should actually be -1. So divide by 100. So now we have that. And now we want to, maybe there's a value that we want to change. So we want to go, maybe we want to start at 70, because we hadn't assigned anything for the green value, and then we want to add 70 over 255 times sine of I. So basically what this is going to do is it's going to, this color value is going to jump up and down. So at some point it should come back down to 0 and we should get a completely pink sphere, and at other times it's going to go up to 70 plus 70, which is 140 over 255. I'm not quite sure what color that's going to give us, but it's going to be interesting. So just to make sure, I'm going to multiply I by 360 over 100, and that should give us more or less a complete revolution. So let's preview that. And we know this is our first sphere. So now we get a kind of color change, and it's nice and gradual. Now you could use if statements to make it a completely radical change, and that could be interesting as well. So let's do something similar. We'll add, this should be formatted a little bit better because it's not very readable right now. So this is the red value. This is green value, and this is the blue value, just so that we're clear. So we can add 70 and see what happens. So we get this variety of colors. We can use the cosine operator. We can multiply this by 2 in both of them so that the color changes 2 times as fast. And we get these interesting gradients of color. And that's more or less how to use it. So I'm going to show a similar example, but just with time, as opposed to a for loop. So I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to get rid of the for loop. And we're going to say $t times 360. So we had we had I times 360 over 100. So wherever that appears, we're going to replace it with $t times 360. And get rid of I, because I is no longer a variable. So that should work. Okay. We start somewhere out there because I'm assuming that $t is a little bit bigger. Yes, it's 1. So let's go back to 0. Okay, so now it says 0, and let's see what happens. So we can see as the sphere goes around, it's gradually changing color. I think 2 might be a little bit too fast. We'll take it just back down to what it was before. And an interesting thing, just because of the way I've structured these examples, is and if we take away the 2 in here as well, it should take on whatever color is there. Yeah, and it seems to follow the color fairly consistency. So that's good. It's a good example. So that's really the basics of color. So it's important that if you're looking at a typical RGB value, that you divide by 255, because the values of color can only go to up to 200. No, in OpenSCAD the values can only go up to 1. So you have to divide. Make sure it's a fraction or a floating point number, a decimal number. That's not that it has to be less than 1. We could actually change the alpha of this. We can add one more and say just so you could see through it. That's a little bit more interesting. And there you go. That's mostly it for color. Fairly simple. You can do this fairly certain on most, if not all, 3D objects in OpenSCAD. Should be all. And it's just, if you want to take pictures or you design something and you just want to take a picture of it and you don't necessarily want to render it with color, or maybe you want to 3D print it in color, but you want to get an idea of what it looks like beforehand, this could maybe be useful. So yeah, that's mostly it for color. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.